welcome everybody, and thank you for venturing out on what I was sure was going to be a deterrent, the amount of rain we had today. It's a rainy night in Georgia, and we don't have Gladys Knight on the program, but we do have something way more topical. We have Patrick Skinner talking about policing after George Floyd. Patrick spent a decade running counterterrorism operations overseas for the CIA. He worked in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Jordan, met with kings and presidents, rose through the ranks. As he did that, he came to believe that the most meaningful application of his training and expertise, the only way to put his beliefs about American security into action, was to become a police officer here in Savannah, where he grew up. His mother's with him tonight. So in 2017, he came home and did just that. He's been featured in a New Yorker profile, written essays for the Washington Post, and given TED Talks, all the while being a beat cop in Savannah's 3rd precinct. He has thousands of followers on Twitter, where he reflects on the work of policing, the importance of treating your neighbors like neighbors, and the behavior of his menagerie of pets. With crime and ever-present worry in Savannah, we welcome what Patrick has to say about policing, and maybe a bit more about his pets.
Good Lord. Hey, so I'm Patrick Skinner. This is going to be a painful 40 minutes as I do the Gladys Knight impression I was promised to do. So I came straight from work, sorry. So that's why I look this way. Okay, so like they said, I'm Patrick Skinner. I'm from here, born and raised, left in '89 basically. Took a long, long way to get back here. I don't really want to talk about myself, but some of it has to do with how I ended up here and how you ended up here. And so I'd like to talk about basically how I see policing in 2021. And again, nothing I say is going to be new. Probably won't even be that interesting, but it will be 40 minutes. And so, but what I want to really emphasize is that there's no trick. There's no answer. There's no solution. The only thing that I see, and I see it day in and day out, and it reaffirms the belief that what we're doing is wrong and we can change it. So first of all, I was in the Coast Guard, did a lot of other stuff, search and rescue stuff, and then I lucked into the CIA. And when I do that, I'm not being humble brag, false modest, or something like that. Something called 9/11 happened. I was a US Capitol Police officer on 9/11, and on 9/12, a buddy said, hey, I have a fax number to a recruiter for the CIA. Why don't we apply? So like 5 of us applied, because why not? And I had, my skills were, I had an English creative writing degree, and that was it. And I could swim a lot, I guess. And so, and then I forgot about it. 100,000 people applied, the same thing, because somehow patriotic meant apply to the CIA. And so I forgot about it, became an air marshal, which was an interesting job. Once they armed the cockpit doors, you don't really need air marshals, don't need anyone to bring a gun on a plane. But so I did that. And then in the summer of 2002, I get a phone call that says, hi, this is somebody, you applied to the government? And I said, yeah, I work for the government. And he said, no, the secret government. And I was like, I think I know what you mean. And he says, real fast, he says, and this is exactly the way he did it. He says, I'm looking at your resume. I can see you're not qualified. I'm just going to ask you some questions to scratch you off my list. And this was before Google and search engines. So you couldn't really cheat on what was about to happen, I guess. You'd have to really flip through the encyclopedias quick, I guess. And he asked me, I still remember some of the questions. Is the Indus River north or south of Kashmir? What was the date of partition? Name 5 towns in the West Bank currently occupied by the IDF. Something else. And I knew it all, because all I had done as an air marshal was sit on an airplane and read newspapers. And so I was temporarily smart, superficially smart, which is exactly what they were looking for, at least in that thing. And so that led to an interview, and then out of the 100,000, they took 80 of us. And I somehow went, and they had a height requirement, and I made it, and I did it. And so that started a very interesting job. I was a case officer, which I guess the official job title is operations officer. My job was to go overseas, recruit foreign spies, those would be the agents, we're the officers, for intelligence of national importance directed by the President of the United States. And so I went to the farm, did a lot of weird stuff, and then did that for 7.5 years. Lived overseas or TD-wide all over the place and lived overseas for a while. Great job. Only reason I left was because I was frankly thinking my luck was running out. I was a little burned out, and then my dad was obviously with Alzheimer's. So I made a decision to come home, Savannah, which I'd never thought I'd come back here. I had a great childhood. Everything was cool. The Lamases are here. My mom's here. My aunt's here. Hi. And so I decided to come home. And when I came home 2011, and so I was still working. I began working for a group called the Soufan Group out of New York City. Ali Soufan was a former FBI agent who has consultancy, and he liked the fact that I was a former CIA guy. I rolled back my cover to say that I could, so I could say I worked for the CIA, therefore ensuring that I could never go back to the CIA. That's the way to do it. So I'm done with him. And then I worked on counterterrorism issues from a consultant level, and I started working on terrorism. And at the time, then ISIS came along, and I had just been in Iraq for several years, and I knew what ISIS was. I knew them before they had the I and the S. And so, but when I wasn't traveling overseas or up to New York to train people on a lot of different things, interviews, interrogations, counterterrorism, I was walking around my neighborhood. I live on Bonaventure, East Savannah. And so I would walk around, and I literally would take my little rubber ball and just bounce around and just walk around. And I noticed, well, Savannah's always had high crime, but I noticed, endemic poverty, endemic crime, but not the headline violent crime, but just this low level cancerous crime. And I realized I didn't know anything about what was happening a block away from me. And I had just got out of a job, and I was still in a job where I was being paid well to talk about places I hadn't been in several years, and to talk about problems I really didn't understand, but also to offer solutions that I knew could not happen, like get the Sunni population on your side, or find out what's happening in Raqqa, Syria. And so when you say these things for over there, they sound cool. You put them in a white paper, or you put them in a briefing or whatever like that, or if you're there, you get the directions to do this, and somehow you think it's doable because it's over there. We're going to get the Sunni population on our side. But I started walking around here, and I started to feel like a fraud. And I literally felt like a fraud. And so I said, I'm being asked to talk about something 7,000 miles away, and I can't tell you what's happening 2 blocks away. And so I started seeing the incongruity of what we were asked to do overseas with what, and we could say we did. We throw $1 trillion and we're going to get this population on our side, or we're going to have country experts. Like somebody can be an expert of a country, and I'm not an expert of Avondale, 6 blocks in Savannah. So it started to drive me crazy, and I said, what is something that I can do that doesn't feel like a fraud? And so I decided, my wife and I don't have kids, so I can make foolish financial decisions, to become a cop. Sorry. And so I was 46, I'm 50 now. And what I saw there, the war on terror, which was a war, and it was a war on a tactic, terrorism, which, as we've seen, hasn't worked. It backfired spectacularly. We stopped another 9/11, which is a significant accomplishment. Other people might have had something to do with it, but it was mostly me. And so you're welcome. But so that didn't happen, but a whole lot of other things happened. And you could see like countries that are falling into despair. And I gave a speech, which I do less and less. This is the first time I've spoke publicly in years, I think, where I was in Grand Rapids with another aunt. And I gave a speech about how the problems of ISIS are endemic and all the stuff. And I even watched it later on. I could see a point during my speech where I said, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know what I'm talking about. The granularity, we can't change anything like this, but maybe I can go home and change something else. And I didn't have a lot of skills, so I became a police officer. And so this war on terror overseas is a war on crime here. Now, the war on terror, at least the phrase is since 9/11, 2001, but war on crime, that's a Nixon thing, I mean, that goes back a while. But the way we've addressed crime in America, it's always been a war on crime. And so when you have a war, wars make monsters of everybody. There are no good things that happen in war. And you have a victor temporarily, and you certainly have permanent victims. Except here, we live here, and so the victims we're creating, I'm not saying there aren't bad people, but the victims that we're creating are our neighbors. So I became a beat cop. I was in Central back then. And it took me about 2 days to realize that the war that I saw overseas is happening here. And the Savannah Police Department, which again, I'm not speaking for them. I like my department. I wouldn't work for a bad department. So I'm speaking as your neighbor right now, not as a police officer. But I saw then that not so much the department, because we have a really good department. We're not a union. There's a lot of accountability. You blink twice, you're fired. If there is such a thing as doing community policing correct, we pretty much do it. It's a violent town. We have correspondingly low uses of force, and which is a remarkable testament. That's something that has to be driven every day. But I could see the larger point of what we are doing as police officers. And I could see the larger point of what poverty, lack of opportunity, lack of anything to do, things that when you say it out loud, you say that's an excuse. And though if you look at it and you see it every day, you know it's a cause. And so I just started realizing, and then because I was older and slower, and I'd done this before because I'd gone through this exact training 20 years before, I started to notice things. So the war on terror is a war on crime here. And whenever times get tough in America, everybody says, even though everyone's freaking about the crime rate, right? The crime rate is down. Okay, murder is up in a lot of places. And it might be up in Savannah by 1 or 2 from last year, but it's still historically low. I mean, that doesn't make the victims feel better, but it's a reason why we shouldn't panic. But the other crimes are down. Aggravated shootings are up, but people are living because we have really good hospitals. They have really bad aim. Those are issues that we really need to work. Those are police issues. And I'm gonna talk real fast about that because that's a police issue. And so the war on terror is exactly the war on crime. Something's happened systemically so much that there's a problem. You can see it. There is a violence of some kind that is more than episodic, domestic violence, rage, misogynistic rage, stuff like that. It's different than that. That is something exists. Actually, there are probably societal reasons for misogynistic violence too. But for street shootings and stuff like that, there's a reason why these things happen. It's the same thing overseas, except we call it terrorism there, crime here. It's the same thing. We are being terrorized by a handful, and I stress a handful of criminals, but we're creating a lot more problems by treating everybody. Overseas, I was tasked to go find out information, get sources, and to put people on our side. But at the same time, I would try to do that, the army would be blowing up a block, and like, and then I would say, okay, I'm not them, here's money, trust me. And here in the police, we do the same thing. You do a sweep or whatever, or the government fails you in every single way. And then I show up and say, I need you to trust me and talk to me about the crime that you saw. It's not gonna happen. It does, but it's really, really ad hoc and painful. So we have a war on terror, which I've seen firsthand, doesn't work. We are constantly in a war here in America on something. War on drugs, war on crime, war on poverty. Again, wars make victims of everybody, and it's not just metaphors. I hate metaphors because we use them as thinking. So we say stuff like it's a war on crime, and you just keep, everyone goes, yeah, it's a war on crime, okay. And then you start buying stuff that looks like a war on crime. You're like, oh, it's a war on crime. And then you start doing tactics like crime, like police dressed like soldiers and police acting like soldiers, and people just go, oh, yeah, it's a war on crime. And then something happens really dramatic, and they go, well, that shouldn't be that way. 2 weeks later, they just go, oh yeah, war on crime. And so it's an interesting problem. So that's the war on crime, war on terror. I now deal with the war on crime, but the same root causes are the same overseas as the same here. And except here we have home field advantage. We live here and we speak the same language for the most part and have the same goals pretty much. And so That's the thing that makes me optimistic in a larger scale. The day-to-day stuff makes me look like this, but I'm still working through that. So that's the war on terror, the war on crime. But because we have a war, somebody has to fight that war, okay? And America is now a 911 nation, okay? You see something, say something, and that say something in America means call 911. And when you call 911 in this country, it means you're calling the police, okay? So as a police officer, I really noticed quickly that, I mean, I'm an English major, so I don't know statistics, but 155% of my calls weren't crime. Okay, now it's more like 75% of the calls that I would go on where someone would call 911 and say this, and we'd go, was not a crime. Okay, now it might be trending. I used to call them near crime because it might be trending toward crime. People are yelling and screaming. If they do it long enough, someone is going to get a fork or knife in the head. But because this is America, nobody gets a fork or knife in the head. What happens? They get shot. So because those are forks and knives in America. And so, but I quickly realized, wow, these aren't crimes. But it is a police matter because what happened? They called the police. Because in America, when you call 911, unless your house is on fire, and even then, the police are coming. So this is this whole defund the police issue, which is a terrible slogan, but a really good idea. And so we'll talk about that. But so I would go to these calls, okay? And I would just see, first thing I would realize is that I'm meeting the unluckiest people that I've ever met. And that every day I would walk home and think I'm lucky, which is the opposite of what's supposed to happen. I was supposed to become jaded. I was supposed to see the worst in people. And I see people at their worst, but I don't see the worst people every now and then. I mean, there are a few monsters. I've met a couple people, but they're very few and far between. Most crime is thoughtless, which doesn't make it better, but it makes it less evil. And so I would come to these calls and I'd realize, wow, this is not a crime. But here we are, police officers, and we're telling someone to do something who's really not in a position to do what you're telling them to do. But when I give you a lawful order, you have to comply. And I mean, you have to comply then. So, and if I tell you a couple of times, and then I'm going to make you do it. And that creates a hands-on situation where things become violent. And there is a cause, there is a reason why those things do happen. But a lot of the times, sometimes we create those issues where you walk up and there's no crime. So you know what I realize we should do? Leave. We should probably just leave. Like I know it's almost a crime to be poor in America, but everyone in Savannah, they hate seeing poor people. They hate it. They can't stand seeing poor people. If you want to show up, if you want to get a 911 call, go to Starbucks and not spend money. Okay. And so, and businesses have their rights. I mean, I get it, but you know, people standing on the side of streets and there is a safety hazard. There is a nuisance hazard, but we would come to these calls and someone would literally just be standing under a tree, or you'd get a call that would say, someone unconscious, don't know if they're breathing. Okay, so we better hope he is, because by the time we get there, he's going to be dead. You could have just gone over and maybe nudged him with it, or whatever. But so we'd go to these calls, and I'd realize these are not police matters, but they are because they called the police, because in America, if you call 911, we've gutted everything else, but the police will do it, which we, the police, also use as an excuse to mishandle a lot of things when we should be focusing on the stuff I talked about earlier, the shootings. So I started realizing that because it's not a crime, or if it's going to be a crime, you better act fast. There's a lot of things going on. But I realized I came up with a motto, and it's really served me well. And then it really served me as I became a training officer. I would say, if you know, to the officer, and certainly to myself, when I come up to these calls and you have no idea what's going on, I would say, if you didn't have a badge and a gun, how would you handle this 911 call? Whatever you come up with that is legal, ethical, and kind, try that first, and then wait a minute, and then maybe try it again. And I'll repeat that. If you didn't have a badge and a gun, how would you handle this? Because if you go in there relying on your badge and your gun, you're going to use one of those. And the badge represents the power of the state. And if I tell you to do something, that's the power of the state telling you, and I'm going to make you do that. Even little Skinners might end up having to do that. So I tried not to put myself in a situation where I had to tell somebody to calm down who can't calm down, or somebody who's running around and making a hazard or stuff like that, but they're not really going to kill themselves or break anything like that. Let them run around for a couple minutes. I don't really care. I've got time, because it saves time to let you spend 20 minutes calling me terrible names. I'm not going to let you call other people names, but you can call me stuff. because it saves us a trip to the hospital or lawsuits or crime or going to court or all these terrible things that happen when I just give what in theory is a lawful order. And so I would come up with this thing, what is, if I didn't have a badge and a gun? And I would end up forgetting I had a badge and a gun a lot of times, which is a weird way to be. But you would realize a lot of times somebody just wanted to be heard, okay? Now, again, I make a clear difference between the violent crimes and then the 75% of the calls we get. Because usually when the violence has already happened, even as a PCOP, certainly as a detective now, it's already happened, okay? I don't really need to go lights and sirens to run to a shooting that happened 7 minutes ago. But sometimes the violence is happening there. And I should tell people, that's easy. That's the easy, clear-cut stuff. This guy is beating up this person, grab him, put him in handcuffs. This guy is standing over somebody with a knife, take that knife away, put him in handcuffs. That's easy. I mean, that's easy. But those are few and far between. It's mostly somebody's yelling at somebody, someone's accusing somebody of something, and you don't know who's right. And you need to, and so I just found out that because overseas, I was very, very aware of all the things I didn't know. The CIA didn't teach you a lot of things, but it taught you to be very aware of all the stuff you didn't know. And so I try to embrace that. I embrace my dumbness. I don't know a lot of stuff. And so, and I also don't say a lot. So these calls would just be like, what's going on? And people yelling and screaming and how like that. And they go, And I would stand like this, which is the opposite of the way you're supposed to stand. I'm like, but I could protect my face, I guess. I don't know. And so, and it used to drive some people crazy. Now, my department's really good and they trained me. I didn't train them, but I just added a few things like that. But it would drive people weird because I would get closer to people than you're supposed to. COVID has been a glorious age for police officers. I mean, except for the fact that you have a bunch of mass bank robbers running around. It's a good time to be a bank robber. But the social distancing is what cops call safe distancing and stuff like that. Stand back. Well, now, hey, we're all standing back. That's awesome. But I used to get closer. I didn't mind if people come up to me. I mean, don't hit me, but you can hug me, you can yell at me, you can poke at me, whatever. Because I realized I'm better at my job by being more comfortable being uncomfortable, because I don't know what's going on. Things are going on. And so I realized most of the calls were like this, and that you could, and I wasn't trying to get rid of reports, like I didn't take a burglary and make it a panhandling, I wasn't taking violent crime and saying, that's a shoplifting. I was realizing that most things aren't crime. Most 911 calls are not crime. And our job, it's like the Hippocratic Oath of cops. Don't make it worse. Show up, you don't know what's going on. In fact, the worst thing to do is when you think you know what's going on and you get out and you tell someone to do something and they're the victim. And it happens all the time. And I've done it myself and it's really foolish. I've even tried, I remember in the beginning, I tried to bark at somebody, and yeah, he was the victim's mom. That didn't work out. And so I realized a lot of this can be avoided by a simple truth that I realized by walking around my neighborhood bouncing a ball, and a simple truth that I could not do overseas. And that was, we are trained for a warrior mindset. The training of police officers is a warrior mindset, because why? We're at war on crime. And everybody in this room can kill me at any moment right now. Any of you could kill me. And not only could you, but some of you probably want to. And I have to act that way. After this speech, more of you will. And so, but my job as a police officer is to somehow internalize this, but not manifest it, which isn't, you can't do that. If I think you're going to kill me, I'm going to react that way. But the training that I went through was all about defensive tactics, which is helpful. And then about how to protect yourself and other people, of course, but also that at any time, anybody will kill you. And that don't sit next to the woman who's crying on the street corner because she might have a chainsaw in her purse. And so you'll see cops do this incredible stuff, sorry, Zoom, where they don't want to be human because they're afraid they'll get murdered. And then, but if you just slow down for a second, you said, well, they're not going to murder me. I mean, I haven't had an old lady pull a chainsaw out of my purse. Now, if it happens tomorrow, play the lottery or something, because I'll take the risk. And and I realized I'm going to flip it. I'm not going to mishandle or not maximize the way to handle these calls, 99% of them based on the 1%. It's like the Cheney doctrine. And the war on terror, Vice President Cheney said, if there's a 1% chance something could happen, treat it as a certainty, which is why you have to go to Iraq, because in theory they had something, which they didn't. That was before my time, don't blame me. And so so instead of that, I'm going to handle 99% of the calls like the person sitting next to me or yelling at me or cussing at me, sometimes even trying to hurt me, which I can't believe you would want to do, is my neighbor. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take this warrior mindset, which I object to wholeheartedly, because I make a terrible warrior. And I said, you know what? So much can change if you just adopt a neighbor mindset. And people, and I started actually talking about that. I don't go to work and proselytize, and we'll talk about how this stuff, but I talked about it. I wrote a couple of Washington Post things, and I talk about it every now and then, but I would do it every day. And even in reports, I'd write the word neighbor, which is funny. You'd start to see the word neighbor in police reports. And it's because it's true. I literally live here. I see people all the time that I have dealt with in good and bad situations. And sometimes I go, oh, I should probably not be eating here anymore. But they're my neighbors. That's a literal truth. But I don't expect everybody to live on East Savannah and work in East Savannah. I encourage it, but if you don't, whatever. But to understand that that's still a literal truth. They're your neighbors. They're not enemy combatants. They're not us versus them. And this us versus them, you see it all over the place. In fact, we have a flag. You know, it's a thin blue line, and it separates us, the cops, from you. You're the them, okay? And we, the heroic, awesome, good-looking police officers, are all that stands between you and the other them, okay? But don't make, even if we like you, you're still not us, sorry. But we are the only thing stopping society from chaos. And that's nonsense. That's nonsense. There's like, I don't know, 500 uniformed cops here. If you guys wanted to take over, which you are in control anyway, take it. I mean, it's nonsense that we're at war on terror. It's a nonsense that we're a thin blue line of anything, okay? And people would tell me, well, that's just words. No, it's not. What you say is what you think is what you do. And what you do every day is who you are. And enough police officers doing that is who the department is. And the department is representative of who the city is. And so I would say, no, these are not, you know, they're not, I always hated the word civilians. You know, I don't want to brag, I was in the military, I was in the Coast Guard, yay. But so it really wasn't the military. But I understand what civilians and military is, and I understand the reasoning behind that. They just mean non-police officers. But there's another term for that, it's called your neighbor, okay? We're all civilians. This is America still. We don't have militarized police in America, except for last summer. And so I started saying it again and again and again. Hey, neighbor, hi, neighbor, report. Neighbor said this, neighbor won. And it made me, it's weird. It didn't just make me a better police officer. I'm still not a really good one, but I'm better, okay? It made me a better neighbor, which made me a better person, which was the exact opposite of what everyone said was supposed to happen when I became a cop. They were saying, oh, you're going to be so bitter. I'm like, I'm short and bald. If I don't have a reason to be bitter yet, I've already passed that window. You know, I'm just happy to be around. And so it's such a powerful mindset. And people are like, oh, that sounds like Mr. Rogers. I'm like, yeah, but Mr. Rogers doesn't have a lot of use of force complaints. Okay. Mr. Rogers doesn't get sued and rely on qualified immunity. I don't even know what that is. And so, does it change everything? Is this the one thing I just told you that we don't have answers and solutions? Yes. Okay. That's it. Now, how you do it is individual. If anyone tries to give you a course on how to be a decent person, I'd be suspicious. Make sure it's a free course. And so I can't say, I mean, I just did say, this is what you should do, but I can do it. And I can show that it works for me. And I can show that, you know, there are violent people. There are exceedingly violent people. And then there are thoughtless people with guns, because this is America and everyone has guns. And so that's what we're gonna, and I wanna close real fast with this. I said earlier, we're the 911 nation, okay? People call for everything because there is nothing else, okay? The sense of community that we have, that we rely on, is torn and fragmented. COVID's made it worse. But those trend lines have been going on for generations and generations, okay? People aren't slipping through cracks. The cracks are miles wide now. And we celebrate the individual, the one person who pulls themselves up. We go, look at that. So those are large, huge issues, okay? We have a lot of problems. When you have a problem in America, you call 911. That means you call the police because there is nothing else. The reason why there's nothing else is because we made a deliberate choice to cut everything and then say, okay, your house is on fire, we'll have the firefighters and the police because they don't do anything without us. But everything else is police. Dog, police. Kid doesn't want to go to school, police. Neighbor not answering the door, police. We should probably call for that. Neighbor's fence line, police. Store refunds, police. Not wearing a mask in a store, police, police, police. Fights over masks, everything. Police, police. You can see where this is going. And again, 75%, well, everything I just mentioned up to the person of maybe someone being dead in their house is not a crime. It's a police matter because you called the police. So what I keep saying is, last year, people realized that, hey, we asked the police to do a lot of things, okay? We asked the police to do dog catchers, consumer advocates, better business, legal aid, marital aid, you name it. And that's been that way forever. So we just say, yeah, we should do that. We're the only country on earth that tries that. And of course it doesn't work, but let's keep doing it. And then the police, we use that as an excuse because, one, it is true that we are tasked to do 1,000 million things that we're not, but then we can also use that as an excuse to mishandle these things and say, hey, well, I'm not really a dog catcher, or I'm not certified to handle a guy who has autism, so I freaked out and shot him. Okay, and these things, they're not inevitable. So, and I'll tell you about that. So, real fast, there is crime. There is a lot of crime. I focus on gun crimes now, and I'm in the major crimes unit. We focus on gun crime, repeat shooter gun crimes, and business is booming. That's police work. Okay, police do not prevent crime. I'm sorry, we do not. Okay, there was a shooting on River Street. There were 60 cops within 100 yards, okay? If more cops meant the safest place in the world, Baghdad would have been safe, DC would be safe, they are relatively safe, but you get my point. Cops are not good at preventing crime. We are good, and we need to get better at solving crime, because the aggravated assault shooting that where they hit up the houses on Paulson or whatever like that, 2 weeks from now, if you don't solve that, that becomes somebody getting shot. And a month from that, it becomes a murder. The time to solve the murder is the aggravated assault 2 months before that. That's where you need to focus your crime. That's where you need to focus. But we can't, in some cases, but it's priorities, but it's the police departments are measured in 911 response time. How soon does a police officer show up to a 911 call? Now, yes, at the end of the year, they'll look at stats and stuff like that, but the thing that generates complaints, the thing that gets people mad and they call their councilman and they call the mayor, which means the chief, and which means they call me, actually people are way above me, is 911 call. I called, the police took 7 minutes. I called, the police took 8 minutes. Why'd you call? Because there's a homeless guy cutting across the Durand Road. Okay, I got off patrol 1.5 years ago. We do 12-hour shifts. You are writing 911 calls from 6:30 in the morning to 6:30 at night, and then you're starting to write the reports. And maybe one of those calls is a crime. When people say defund police, it's a terrible slogan, but I get what they're trying to, at least what I think they're trying to say. How about this? Fund all the reasons or all the things that stop people from calling 911. I'll say it again. Fund all the stuff that stops the 911 call. Now, somebody gets shot, yeah, you're going to want to call the police, okay? There are a lot of things that crime of passion, whatever stupid term you want, spontaneous crime, we'll deal with that. The important thing is to solve it. Unsolved crimes are an injustice, but they're also a threat. People keep shooting until they get stopped. But everything else isn't a crime. So why are we sending the police? Because there's no one else. That doesn't, and then so people say, okay, so we're going to send mental health units and stuff like that, which I think is a good idea. It is a good idea. You want a crisis unit. We have one now. You want to keep that, but maybe focus on before they dial 911. I can't say it again and again. We are the most expensive 911 nation on the planet. We are continually in these wars, okay? We're in a war on crime again. We're in a war on COVID. And in this war, the combatants are everybody, and we all call 911 over things that aren't really, but they all become part of this war. And I'm begging people, anybody who wants to listen, the police have to do a better job. We cannot use being overworked as an excuse to take the humanity out of somebody, okay? Now, I'm a police officer. I'll defend us in this thing. Guns are everywhere. I cannot overstate how many guns are around. I think last year or in 2019, I think the police took 500 guns stolen reports from unlocked cars in Savannah. That's 500. And that's nothing. That's nothing. People aren't stealing guns or buying them online. They're straw purchases, and they're also taking them out of unlocked cars, okay? The idea that somebody has to look around to get a revolver and do something, no. The people that shouldn't have guns have automatic weapons. And I mean, I know what I'm talking about when I say automatic weapons. I mean illegally modified automatic weapons. 7.62, AK-47s, 5.56 AR-15s, high capacity, 100-round magazines, 30-round magazines for, Glocks and stuff like that. That's police work, okay? But that's also a societal issue of why do we have this and why are we the only country on earth that thinks this is a good idea? But those are way above my pay grade. But so the police approach things knowing everybody can be armed because they are armed. Now, that doesn't mean they want to kill us, okay? Again, I mean, usually I'm not worried about the gun I see. And so, but there are guns everywhere. There are everywhere. And they mean the dumbest fight, because my mom's right here. If I had a pistol when I was in high school, my brother would not be alive right now. I'll tell you right now. I tell you 100,000 times a year, I would be given a speech from Reedsville prison. And I still would have thought I was justified. But guns cause a permanent solution to a temporary aggravation, okay? And so that is something that we as a nation we refuse to have. I don't even know how we go about having it, but I know we still need to have it. But the police are dealing with this, okay? But that doesn't mean we have an excuse, okay? I see a lot of things that, just like you do, that are terrible. I go by the Hippocratic Oath that my job is to not make it worse. That's it. I can try to make it better, but man, I know my limitations and I know what's going on. I will definitely not make it worse. How about we'll start from there, all right? And every day, if I didn't have a badge and a gun, how would I handle this 911 call? And whatever is legal, ethical, and kind, I'm going to do. And I keep telling everybody that. My department tolerates that. They seem to embrace it. But for us, what we can do is, right now, is to understand we are all neighbors. And it's not a cute little saying, even though it is. It is the truth. It is the only truth I know. That's it. So, I even get emotional thinking about it because it's true. I see terrible things every day, but I see a lot more beautiful stuff every day. The violence is isolated, it's horrific, it's permanent. And some things you see families that are just destroyed. They're not coming back from that. Okay, they're not. Our job is to get them justice. We're not going to make things better, but we're going to get them justice and to prevent that guy who killed that person from doing it again. And to prevent the guy who just shot up a street corner, catch him, catch his buddies, and it's always guys with always guns, and to stop the next shooting, because that next shooting will lead to something. And you see that all of a sudden a kid got murdered over a beef that happened a year ago. That's our job. And I don't expect, like they always say, they want the community to help. I mean, yes, if you know something, tell me who did it. That would be awesome. But those are police matters. We should get really good at that. Everything else, though, is a neighbor problem. And I mean a neighbor problem. And that's it. And I just wish that we could understand that it's like, oh, what are you going to do? Like when somebody pulls out a gun and you approach them at a neighbor. Well, I'd probably try to handle the situation like anybody would, but I'm not going to go into the situation with any other mindset. Everyone in this room is my neighbor, but so is everybody in county detention right now. They are. Some of them are literally my neighbors, like 2 blocks away. It doesn't make for awkward walks, but it also makes for keep me in check. But again, I use it again and again. It drives everything I do because it's the only thing I know. if we do not embrace this neighbor mindset, if we do not get rid of this warrior mindset, I mean, this notion of police as a thin blue line, one, most police are not thin. Two, we are not holding back anything, okay? We're not. We are the luckiest people on earth, okay? I am a white police officer in the South, so by definition, I am the least persecuted person on the planet, okay? I accept that, and I understand that when I'm on a street corner, I am standing with one other person and there's 500 years of history in between us. I get that, I accept that. I'm not to blame, but I am responsible. Blame is for babies, but I am responsible because I said this. I do, I will, I took an oath. And so I understand these things and I'm not going to betray that. And I'm not going to betray my oath, but I'm also not going to betray my neighbors. And we're going to do it every day. And I think this notion of war on crime, which is a war on terror, and I've seen both, we're going to lose both if we fight them. The only way to win is to not fight. And so we're not a thin blue line. We are not warriors. We are not punishers. That's a cartoon. We're not anything except lucky neighbors. And our job as police officers is to leverage our luck with people that probably haven't had 2 lucky days in a row. Now, does that mean they're not guilty? No, it doesn't mean that. That's a different issue. But I'm the luckiest person on earth, okay? And my job is to leverage that luck for people that don't have it. And your job is to do the same thing. And your job is to demand accountability for the police, but also accountability for yourselves. Because literally, that's the answer that I said we didn't have. That's it. You just have to figure out how to do it every day. That's it. That's close enough. There'll be no questions. Yeah, go ahead.
Question?
Yes.
So you're an anomaly, and you should be talking to an audience full of police officers, not your neighbors. I think that there is, you haven't told us how you're going to replicate you in all those officers. I do know that there is
Clone technology. Cloning.
the new city manager said that he was looking at an office in the city environment to be neighborhood engagement through the police, and so that there could be a transformation in the way neighborhoods conceive of police, not as an occupying force, which I think is the most prevalent feeling right now, to more of a friend. And I just saw the news about the PAL. Are you the agent for PAL?
No, nobody looks to me for athletics. No, but yeah, and I agree with that. I am queasy about grand gestures. I'm queasy about task force. I'm queasy about that things because we got into this doing the wrong thing day by day. We're going to get out of it by doing the right thing day by day. I am an anomaly just because I have an interesting backstory, I guess. And I tend to put more thought into it. And I say, I want to use my English degree somehow. So damn it, I'm going to write about it. But I'm far from unique. Again, I was trained by my people that, I didn't train them. I just have pithier statements. But I am very, very aware. I'm very aware of the history, the current, what's going on. And community engagement and going out and talking to people. Yeah, that's good, I guess, but it can't overcome doing the wrong thing every single day or barking at somebody. I mean, it just can't. And there's this phrase about something in the army or like the diplomatic private or something like that, where the fate of a war hinged on a private being nice to somebody in the corner of Fallujah. Good luck. But in some of it's true. A lot hinges on interpersonal conduct. And a lot of it is if I do the wrong thing, I'm held accountable. If it's a mistake, I'm held accountable and then rectified. But if it's not, you should be fired. If not, go to jail, whatever it is. But a lot of it can be avoided by embracing a neighbor mindset. What am I doing about it? I'm doing it every single day. When I was on patrol, I was a training officer. I loved it because I didn't have to write accident reports. Turn your lights on in the rain, please. But that's what I would do. I'm training officers to say, hey, in fact, I got certified as a federal law enforcement training instructor at FLETC, so I could come back to Savannah. And again, my department sent me there, so it wasn't me. And I train every now and then when I have enough time And the class is basically, if you didn't have a badge and a gun, how would you handle this call? And it's 8 hours. And then do it again and again. And that's how I try.
Before you ask a question, could you stand up and say your question carefully and clearly, because we are recording this and we want everyone to hear what your questions are. So you in the back, that would be great.
You say we should fund this stuff to stop the 911 calls. So what is your priority list of that stuff?
That's a good question. I mean, I only know what I see. I mean, I am not a researcher. I'm not an analyst. I was never too smart for that. So I'm an anecdote machine. But what I see is, I mean, some basic stuff like I would probably go to kindergarten through K through 12 and teach conflict resolution. I don't know, maybe 50 minutes a day instead of just little things. That's it. I mean, just little things like, I mean, stop being so sorry, stop being so angry. I didn't swear. And so, because again, everybody gets angry, but in America, we have guns. And again, I can't tell you how, again, the guns are everywhere. So I would start with K through 12, and it doesn't have to be some indoctrination. How about whatever you want to do where it teaches you? You were a teacher for a very long time, and you taught me not to be mean. And so that conflict resolution, and it could be, you know, from K through 12, it should be every single, you know, instead of citizenship or whatever like that, how about be a good neighbor? Start a class. It costs nothing. We don't need all these expensive things. Now, we do need to spend money on stuff, but we don't need all these expensive task force, and we don't need a new office, and we don't need to do these things. We just need to do the right thing and then do it again tomorrow. So I would probably start and say, okay, how do we start? But that's a long-term thing, but that's okay, because the best time to plant a tree is 12 years ago. K through 12, conflict resolution. The healthcare, holy God. I mean, the state of healthcare, people are dying. Our neighbors just died a week ago of COVID. And so that causes stresses, that causes people to be, you know, unemployment. Healthcare has got to be an issue. Mental health is abysmal here. Savannah is a really good place to be homeless relatively. There is no good place to be without a home, but Savannah is good because the city is kind. It is, and the weather's okay. And we have hospitals and shelters, but they're desperately underfunded, desperately. Drug abuse is beyond rampant with opioids and meth. Those are things that I would do. I would fund outpatient drugs. I would try to find increased mental health, and then start rapidly teaching people not to fight. Other than that, I don't know.
Artist.
Thank you for your kind and wise words. I call 652-6500, which is non-emergency. If I see something that I know doesn't belong in emergency, often there's no answer.
That is correct.
I guess you're saying we need to beef this up.
Yes. Now, again, I'm speaking as a neighbor. The non-emergency line is important because it's a recognition that most things aren't emergency, but the focus is on answering the emergency calls. They don't have enough people right now to answer the emergency calls. And so the non-emergency calls, they're probably going to be lower in the priority. But those are the things that lead to the 911 call, and that those little issues that lead, landlord disputes. I mean, there's so many issues. We need to do a better job at finding some kind of resources so that someone answers the 911 or the non-emergency 651 number, and then tell people, call it. I mean, I think we do an okay job, but again, the dominant issue is if you see something, say something, call 911. I don't think we should be afraid of our neighbors. Now, if a guy's running around with a knife, don't walk up to him and say, hey, what's going on, buddy? But I'm not saying that, but I am saying if you see a guy who you think might not be breathing on the side of the road, call 911 and then go see if he's breathing. I mean, we're so damn afraid of each other. Trust me, I know what scary people are like. I met them, they exist. You'll know when you see them. Most people aren't, they're just annoying. Sorry.
Quick question. What about using the 911 operators to send calls?
Like a
out?
triage. Yeah, and so a lot of cities do that. And we do that. But the thing is, there's not a lot of things to send them to. Okay, so other cities which have a lot more money or forethought in the 70s, they'll say, okay, this is a mental health crisis issue. Okay, this is something that we should, the police might still want to come, but then we'll send this. But then you're like, well, then you're just sending double people and you're bringing police. Because again, the argument that I see again and again is, what are you going to do? Send a social worker to a guy with a chainsaw? And I go, no, but 99.9% of the calls aren't somebody with a chainsaw. Let's start with that. Why do we constantly go to the extreme of saying, well, what if a guy had a nuclear bomb? I don't know, because no one does. How about handle the call as it is? We don't have anything right now like that.
But wouldn't it be a good idea to?
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, that would be the ultimate solution, would be to have, so that cut back the number of reasons why people call, the systemic despair, injustice, and I mean, there's 1,000 reasons why. Try to address those root issues, which we as a nation have proven never to be able to do. But so then, okay, fine, we can't stop you from calling 911, but we can at least send the right person. That would be a good thing. We don't have that right now. We don't.
I was one of those people who called 911 because someone didn't move on the street.
Yeah.
I went up, there were 2 people around. I went to the fire department, which was right there. They normally have EMTs there.
Yeah, they're all now
No,
EMTs.
they said, call 911.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, I mean, I literally have had people report a crime, and because I need to be dispatched to it, I'll say, can you call 911? And, sorry, I'll tell you something real fast. I hope you don't mind. So one thing I noticed real fast in the Savannah Cares, I mentioned this to them last year. When police are dispatched, the 911 call, okay? So they call the 911 call taker. That's the person who literally says, 911, what's your emergency? My dog won't eat, whatever it is, whatever the emergency is, okay? And then that person types it up and sends it to the dispatcher. So the person that dispatches the cop is not the 911 call, okay? Taker. So you have another person who's literally sitting in a cubicle right over there, and they go, okay. Then they look at where the thing is, what unit, what department, whatever like that, what beat. So they'll go, okay, 35 Alpha 1, which would be that means you're in precinct 3, B35. Go to this call. At the same time you hear it on your radio, you have a computer. We can't call it a computer, so they call it an MDT, a mobile data terminal, which I believe is called a laptop. And so, and it says, so you'll hear this and it'll say, okay, blah, 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 Skinner, they'll say 35 Alpha 1, go to this. Okay, but at the same time, you'll see it. It'll be whatever they just said will be written there. It'll have the address. And I noticed one day when I was training, I mean, like 2 days into it, and I'm not driving because I can't be trusted to drive a car yet. And so I scroll down and you see the name and the number of the person who called 911. And I'm like, huh, who's Beverly? And they always like, oh, that's the person that called 911. And then we go up to the scene and then no one would answer. So they would say, okay, dispatch, can you try to call that number back? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, that's weird. Okay. And so I let that happen a couple of times. And finally I said, why don't we call that number? Because we're the one driving to the 911 call, and cops always say we have to make split-second decisions, which we do. But we can also, it takes 90 seconds to get to a place. Well, how about that? I can get by 90 seconds right there. And so I would say, let's call Beverly. I'd call Beverly up, and because I was afraid of people knowing my number, I would block my call. What happened? Nobody answered because they thought I was a telemarketer or something like that. So I was like, So I didn't have a work phone then. And so I would use this phone and you can have my number. And I would call and say, hi, Beverly, this is Officer Skinner. You called 911. What's going on? And they could tell me it's a lot better than it seemed. Sometimes it's a lot worse than it seems. Most of the time they'll tell you it's already happened. So you can slow the F down and not cause a crash going to a crime that already happened a day ago or 15 minutes ago. And sometimes it'll tell you to speed up. And I literally had people say, hey, he's banging on the door. And I'm like, stay on the line, Beverly. And that was like the cool Hollywood moment. But for the most part, it told you what to prepare for. Okay, this guy's wearing a black suit, he has a gun, or he doesn't, or he left 20 minutes ago. And then I get over there and say, everybody slow down. Or don't rush to X because X is where it happened. He's now over here. And so it helped me quickly, but it also did something more powerful. It allowed me to step out of the car into violent, loud, chaotic, and I mean loud scenes where people are screaming, people are yelling. Even the people that call aren't happy to see you, I don't care. But it allowed me to do one true thing. I step out of the car and I say, hi, I'm Officer Skinner. We just spoke. That's the truth. We just spoke. And I'll tell you what, is it superficial? Yes. Is it effective? Yes. and you would watch them go, huh. Now that means they could focus a rage on me, which is fine because I'm a rage magnet. I don't care about that, but as long as you don't hurt anyone else. But it formed a connection. Are we lifelong pals? No. But for that moment, that's all I need is to slow down, figure out what's going on, who's got what. And so I bought 90 seconds. And so I don't buy that. You know, you just show up and you run into something that, well, why are you running if you don't know what you're running into? Slow down, call, there's a number right there. Most of the time you'll hear it's not as bad as it is. Sometimes you will hear it's worse, way worse. And it's scary and it happens, but then at least you know. You have 90 seconds head start. Man, you can do a lot of planning in 90 seconds. If you knew somebody was going to jump out of a bush, you probably wouldn't pull up to the bush. You know, you do a lot of cool things. You can do a lot of stuff and then not say, oh, I had to shoot him because I drove up to the bush. And so that's what I would do. And it also did something else. They had my number. Skinner, not Officer Skinner, just call me Skinner, not Detective Skinner, just call me Skinner. And I have your number. By the time I left precinct 3, I had 250 numbers. And if you needed me, call me. And they did call. And people would always say, oh, well, they're going to spam you and stuff. I said, no, they know I'm a cop. And some people call with problems I can't help, but you know what? They can listen for 5 seconds. And that was just a basic thing. It cost nothing.
I think we can more or less agree that the ideal fully fund support services so that appropriate people out on call. Short of that, some jurisdictions are training their police officers in mental health interventions and de-escalation techniques.
Yes.
Is that something we do around here? Or should
Yes.
we do?
It is. So during training in patrol school, they had a 40-hour block called CIT, Crisis Intervention Training, which I believe came from like Kansas City. It's a national model. And that was actually the best part of training. I liked it. They took you around to all the rehab centers, the outpatient centers, the hospitals, Georgia Regional. One, just to say, these are the resources. These are the limitations of what, hey, don't send somebody to the hospital for this. But that was really effective. De-escalation, yeah, they did it. They should do it more. I think if you got time to do jumping jacks, you probably got time to spend 15 minutes getting yelled at by each other. And it costs nothing. You don't need equipment. You don't need all this stuff. Student, yell at me, call me names, figure out a way without a badge and a gun, because you're a student, you don't have a badge and a gun anyway. Try it. Costs nothing. Do it every single day for the 2 months you're training, and then you'll be used to it when you get out. They do it, they should do it more.
So I have a question.
Yes.
So all of the schools I see have police departments
Resource
at
officers.
the schools. I
Mhm.
see police, I forget what they're called, but they're.
School resource
schools.
officers.
Are they trained to do some of this teaching that you're thinking would be really good for?
I think so. There's only a couple of them. Now there is the Board of Education police. So
That's who I mean.
yeah, so that's a separate thing. I have no idea what they do. We all have the same basic training, but I don't know what they do after the fact. If their training stopped at the basic, then the answer is no. But I'm sure, but they tend to have a good rapport. I find it invaluable when we're investigating juvenile crime, which there is. But there's a larger issue of, do you want police officers in school, which is that's an art conversation people should have. I like it because it helps me figure out people's names and stuff. But in terms of conflict resolution, yeah, they should be really good at it. Are they? I don't know. I imagine they are.
Are there any communities in the country that are moving in the right direction?
I mean, I hear anecdotally, I read just like everyone else. I know, like, you hear Denver did this or Chattanooga does this. I know Houston had a pretty good police chief for a while. I don't know. I'm sure there are. I mean, I'm sure. Again, I don't know any answers. I just know what really doesn't work. And I can tell you what doesn't work. What works is what you have to figure out. Each city will figure out what it is. I know we don't need to reinvent the wheel. I was reading a paper from 2008. I just Googled something about Savannah police, and it was a 2008 paper about community policing and about crime suppression, the exact same. And if I took that out and I put it at a city council meeting, you would thought that someone said it last summer. It's the exact same thing because it's such an obvious answer. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Be prepared to grab somebody, put handcuffs, be prepared to respond to violence, but do not bring the drama yourself. The drama is going to come. I mean, I call violence, so I call it drama. That's going to happen. I mean, it's going to happen. Our job is to not bring it. Our job is to never bring that drama. You will have to, some people are very insistent on going to jail. Our job is to deny them that until we have to, okay? But yeah, I'm sure 1,000 cities are doing it right. We should learn from them as well. I don't think there is nothing new. There is nothing to discover. There is no technology you can buy. There is no training, expensive virtual reality. We don't need that. One, it's going to fail and it's be real expensive, and then it'll lead you, that's the cost. Teach people to do the right thing. A lot of cities are doing it right. I think we're doing it right. I do. I do think that I would not work for a bad department. I'm not a rah-rah person. I don't have it in me to change a department. But so I think we do it right, but we have to do it right every single day.
Yes.
I worked in an inner city neighborhood in Rochester, New York, where they did it right. They don't do it right anymore in Rochester. But we had a weekly meeting on Tuesday morning with somebody from welfare, the inspection department, police community relations person, talk about neighborhood problems and going to the development corporation. We had a way of dealing with more serious problems that the police couldn't handle. And I want to say, my wife's a counselor, and she gets people referred to her for anger management. And when she talks about it, I get an impression that 50% of the time the wrong person was sent.
Yeah.
Is there some way to get to where the person who's there on the scene gets a better assessment?
Yeah, I mean, there is. I mean, the police need to do, first and foremost, we need to police ourselves. We need to be in charge, control of our own emotions. There's nothing you can do to make me mad. I'm short and bald, but yeah, but we need, there needs to be qualified assessments and stuff. I know that as a beat officer, man, I would love to pawn off anything like if it seemed like I could send someone to the hospital, or because I would prefer to send someone to the hospital instead of jail, but man, good Lord, isn't there another option between doing nothing and sending someone to jail? Sometimes we literally have done that where the only option is to take someone to jail and you know it's wrong. I mean, they violated the law, but oh well. But yeah, there's so much wrong. There's so much wrong, but yes, there needs to be better assessments on the scene of who's in crisis. We have a behavioral health unit with 3 officers who are pretty well trained at it, but it's 3 people. They're busy.
Is there any data that your local studies, big studies, showing that the officers on horseback will, I know every time I'm in the city and I see the I always get
That is such a good question.
wonderful, warm fuzzy feeling like, yeah, that's a pretty secure place to be. And I don't think, I know the kids all come around, and it just looks like it's a very wonderful thing to do. Should we do more of it?
I don't know. I don't know. I actually don't know if it works. I know if we wanted to seem like it worked, we could find the metrics. I don't know. I know that it's effective for like that to show presence. It's effective for crowd control. It really is because horses are big. I learned that when I'm standing next to them. So they are a really good, effective way to move like 20 people away without dramatic, military looking stuff. So they have their use. Do they reduce crime? I have no idea. I don't know. That'd be interesting. I think we only have 2. I was never allowed to ride a horse. I always had to ride a pony. True story.
And
Is Chief Pitcher, are you speaking for him? Is he on board with all the things that you told us?
No, I do not. I speak for myself. I am not speaking for the Savannah Police Department here. I'm speaking for myself. Now, this department has always been very supportive. They have sent me around. I've spoken for them in several conferences. And yeah, I think that everybody supports what I'm saying. I mean, it'd be hard to, I'm not saying anything confrontational or controversial, like do the right thing.
Are the officers being trained in the way that you're suggesting would be a good neighbor?
Yes, I think so. Could it be done more? Sure, it could be. And I'm not in the training department. I turned that down so I could work on gun crime. But yeah, I think they're doing a good job. The issues are both larger and smaller. Again, everything depends on the one officer, but that one officer has a lot of issues that should have been solved before they got there. Should we ask more of our police officers? Yes, we should. We should. But are we asking a lot too much sometimes? Yes, we are. Does that excuse criminal behavior by police? No, it doesn't. Does it explain why we're writing 15 million police accidents for private property damage when you back into a car at Target? Why is that a police matter? Those are issues that need to be resolved because, of course, they're not police matters, but they are because you called the police.
Also, Skinner, as he said, is talking or talking about the chief. I want a committee that the mayor established last year for citizens accountability, for review of emergency services. We looked at police reports, how they handle police community relations. We interviewed Officer Skinner probably 6 months ago, or a year ago, and 3 of his topics he spoke about tonight, we made recommendations to the mayor and chief that they're good. One is that increase in annual training for crisis intervention for every officer, every member of the department, instead of just having basic training. We established the mental health teams, so 911 gets a call, they can send a mental health crisis intervention team instead of uniformed officer. Uniform presence at a mental health issue shows the authority of the state, as Officer Skinner said, which has its own force. It implies something that you don't want that mental health person to receive yet. So we want non-uniform members to go train in that specifically. We've also made recommendations on different police response, how to handle 911 calls. They increase the number of report writers on the phone, take those reports by telephone, as opposed to sending the uniform car out there. And they talk about actually issuing phones to every officer so they can call the complainant en route. We recommended they do that so they can use the comments and learn more about what's going on. They made those recommendations. They implemented every one of those. Out of the 12 we recommended, in the interim report, they only turned in. And the final report should be in this year.
Yeah, it had an impact.
How did I put it, I think I saw a thing talking about community policing. I was at a community meeting a couple of weeks ago, where they really don't have a police presence out there. But I'll use, what I just said, I came down Louisville Road, I've got two police vehicles parked, this way to each other by an empty building, Seaport, railroad. To me, that's not really my idea of community policing. I think also you have a department that has challenges developing rapport with certain communities here in this city.
Mhm.
That's something they really gonna have to work on. You talk about ride along, forget a ride along. How about doing a walk along? So you get to know
Yeah, that's a great point. If I can spend like 2 minutes on this, because I think it's important. I was a big believer in walking beats until I actually had to walk a beat. Because American cities, Savannah, except for a couple, it's America. It's not designed to walk. And of course, even if I wasn't shape, if something happened 5 blocks from now, it's going to take me a long time to get there. And it's hot. So we're not going to do walking patrols. They have some down in Broad Street, that's where you could do it. That's the most inner city New York. But Kyla Brownsville, Tatumville, stuff like that, which are dense, you're still not really walking around because the distances of these beats, these districts or precincts are huge. I mean, they're big. There are 4 of them for all of Savannah / Chatham. But you bring up a report about rapport. Savannah has it is a diverse, it's a majority city. So is the department, I believe. They do a pretty good job. Savannah, again, I'm not cheerleading my own department. I wouldn't say anything bad about them. I just wouldn't say anything. But to your larger point of rapport, that's a police issue. And that's a Savannah issue, but that's a police issue. And that comes from the warrior mindset. That comes from me telling you what to do. Me telling you, I somehow say you should solve your own problems. Look at it this way. In America, we beg you to call 911 for anything. And then when you have the audacity to call 911 for something I think is stupid, I demean you. That's pretty stupid. Why'd you call 911 for this? Well, because that's America. That's what we're supposed to do. And you're supposed to treat me with respect. And so the rapport issue, that's real. That is an issue. Police officers struggle. They struggle with not talking like police. They struggle with, this distance. I appreciate that. Some guy made $1 million developing something called verbal judo. That's insane. That's insane. That's basically saying, I'm not going to listen to anything you say, and I'm going to deflect it, because that's cool like judo, and I'm going to then, that's insane. That's the opposite of communication. I don't care what you say, I'm just waiting to deflect it, and we're trained that. And we're saying that's really good at de-escalation. I appreciate that, but man, I would punch myself in the face if I kept doing that. And you're trying to tell me a real problem. So that is an issue. You don't need any money to fix that. You need to start the day you're hired. Why do you want to be a police officer? Tell me without sounding like a police officer why you want to be a police officer. Okay, that's good. You're not going to be a hero. You're not going to be a warrior. You're going to be a good neighbor, and you're going to be paid pretty poorly to do it, but you're going to live, maybe we'll cut you a break and live in the neighborhood you work in. How about that? But talk to normal people, and then do it in training, and then do it every single day. Do it every day. That's the rapport. You know how you can't fake rapport. Now you can do superficial, like, hey, I'm Officer Skinner, I just talked, but you know how long you develop a relationship? Every single day for the rest of your life. Try that.
Yeah. I attended the East Side Neighborhood Association meetings.
I have not.
A few years back. And one of the things they did, which I really thought was valuable, and they had a local policeman there at every meeting.
Mhm.
It was Saturday morning, once a month. And people got to know him. They also had somebody from the fire department there. They had a box in the room that you could slip something in as you walked in. And so they asked you if you knew of something going on in your neighborhood, drugs and so forth, to please just put it in a box. And not all of them do that. I thought it was very valuable.
It is. And so I'm a believer in not either or, but both. We need to do that. They still do that. Each precinct has a neighborhood resource officer, community officer. Sharif Lockett was the one in precinct 5. Great. A lot of people know him. He's now a sergeant. That's a full-time job. They're not writing one-on-one calls. They help, but their job is to get to know people, and they do it. But that can't just happen every month at the Crime Stoppers meeting. It can't. I'm sorry. And also, that's a self-selecting audience. You're already like us, or you already have enough connection that you want to yell at us about not doing our job or whatever, which we should. You're going to show up to the meeting. I'm not worried about the people in this room. It's the people that aren't in the room that we need to connect with. So, but we need to do both. We need to have those meetings. Those meetings are important because you just had a positive meeting, and you remember from a couple of years ago, and it does have a positive impact. We need to do that, do it more, but then every single police officer needs to understand he's a neighbor first, police officer second. And it costs no money.
In the back.
Yes, one of the things that I read an article, and I think it was but it was very comforting knowing that you live where you work. But I don't think the policemen all have, nowadays with prices of homes and rents so high, and I would imagine most of them don't necessarily live in town.
More than I thought, but it's still a significant small portion. I agree. And there are, and they make the choices based on individual choices. I will say that. So I graduated from Johnson High School, yay, 1989. The public schools back then were awesome. Okay. They were desegregated. I went to Anderson Street School, Myers Middle School, Johnson High School, May Howard Elementary. Yay, not to equal, but excel. But, and I, despite math, I got a good education. The schools were desegregated. I come back in 2011, the schools are segregated. That's the biggest thing I noticed when I came back here was schools where it was 60-40 at Johnson, maybe back then, it's 99.6%. This is insane. I mean, it is insane. And so that is massive. So people don't want to live because they think the schools are bad, because they equate 99% Black with bad schools, when that's not true, but it shows something's really out of balance. That's what it does show. And so, or they don't want to live here because, and I have heard police officers say they don't want to live in a place where people know there are police, because for 2 reasons. I've heard both reasons. One, because people would bother them with their problems. Okay, I get it. No one wants to work 24 hours a day, but your neighbor 24 hours a day. And also they think they might be targeted. Do people target police? I guess so, sure. I mean, it does happen. Again, it's statistically just like the woman with a chainsaw. It could happen. Has it happened to me? No, and I'm going to live my life until it does.
I think that we will have one last question.
Make it good.
Stand up.
Use that term, but is there any training about bias, the innate bias we have?
Yeah.
When you see certain people and then we're fearful and then we see other people and not.
Yeah, so every year we have refresher training. You have to have 20 hours. I mean, it's 20 hours over the year, boo, but it does add up. Some of that is shooting and stuff like that, but you have to have community policing and you have to have bias training. And is it a check the box exercise? No, I guess if you approach it that way, it will be, but no, it's good. But I will say, I had to tell myself, why am I looking at this person? And I had to do that. I had, and I would say it out loud. I'm driving, the CIA taught us to do commentary driving. You would say out loud what you're doing. I'm driving along, I see a guy over here because you were looking for threats overseas in Lebanon or something like that. Oh, Hezbollah or RPG, whatever like that. Here, I don't have to worry about the RPGs, not yet. And so, but I would say, like, why am I looking at this guy? Oh, there's a black young guy walking this way. And I would say, why? And I would say out loud to myself, why am I looking at him? Is it because I like his shoes? Is it because he's doing something? Because doing something is what I should be looking at. But who you are isn't what I should be looking at. Now, unless I get a description, because we get descriptions of a 911 call and the suspect is a black guy wearing a black clothes. Okay, thanks, cool.
Well, thank
White
you.
guy.
So Officer Patrick Skinner, I think you more than told us all of the things that we worry about.
Thank you.
And, some of us have read your wonderful writing and we hope you'll keep on writing.
Maybe one this weekend. Who knows?
Oh, well, good. And we thank you so much. I think if I were Officer Skinner's mother, I'd be pretty damn proud.